Hello, everyone. I want to know if you can hear me and if you can see me. If someone could be kind and send a little chat message or a Q&A, you should see the chat box at the top, the very top of your screen or on the far right of your screen. And just let me know that you can see me. Okay, great. Thank you, whoever responded. Okay, excellent. Very good. So thanks so much, you guys, for doing this again with me. Last week we did this and I forgot to hit the record button. So here we go again. I'm offering this just to see and be of support to each of you during the COVID crisis. And we're going to review a lot of self-soothe tips that we've learned in therapy together. And hopefully you can do on your own at home. You can share with your loved ones. And there's a couple things we need to go over first before getting into the material. So we're going to move on to the very first slide, which is basically about the caveats for the webinar and kind of the preface for it. So the very first thing I just want to remind you all of is that you are implying consent by being on the webinar this morning. So most of you, you're not going to see each other, but occasionally there will be a question or answer or a chat, and you might be able to see each other's names. So it's not completely confidential. There is a way of muting your name. You can go to the very far right of your name on Zoom, and there's an arrow, and then you can drop down the arrow and you can change your name and how it's displayed. So if you want to take a moment and do that right now. Okay, and the other thing is this webinar is really intended for anyone who's already had experience with or in therapy using EMDR, Somatic Experiencing, or Brainspotting. It probably would not make sense to a lot of people who haven't had that kind of therapy modalities. So this is really based for you guys. And we may share this widely later, but for right now, this is for you and anyone that you know that has used this in their therapy practice. Okay, so this is a webinar, a very brief webinar about self-soothe. It's not intended to replace therapy, obviously. And it's a really brief overview, and it's to help in crisis. It's not intended to repair any attachment wounds. Obviously, that's for your own therapy work and inner growth work, okay? And each point that we're gonna go over, basically each slide, is worthy of a day-long seminar. And hopefully I'll be recording some podcasts soon that can help go into these things in a lot more detail. But just wanting to remind you all that this is just a brief overview this morning. And then of course we are on Zoom. So there might be some technical difficulties. Usually Saturday morning is a really good time to do this. But if there are technical difficulties, you know, I do ask for your patience and I'll do my best to try to troubleshoot them. And then the content of this webinar is really a collection of my training in EMDR, Somatic Experiencing, and Brainspotting. And of course, my own life experience, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and jump on to the context of how I'm holding this entire webinar, okay? And the context of basically how I hold each of you and myself in crisis. So we're gonna be looking at mind, body, and spirit, and what each of those actually means, at least to me, in my clinical knowledge and my life experience. So the first thing is mind. When I am talking about mind, I am talking about your thoughts and emotions, okay? Now, there is a concept of mindfulness that everyone talks about. It's a big buzzword. And mindfulness is basically the awareness of our thoughts and emotions in the moment, okay? So having a mindful presence is in this very moment to be aware of what thought you're having, what emotion you're having, what you're feeling in your body, what is around you. That is being mindful, okay? There's sometimes some confusion about what mindfulness actually means. So thoughts and emotions are just a part of our mind. They're not all of it. And we have a consciousness. So consciousness is something that predates mind, it predates thought, it predates emotion. And according to spiritual teachers, it lasts beyond thoughts and emotions. So we have an ego and we have an ego observer. We could almost describe that consciousness is almost like the ego observer. So right now I'm aware that I'm giving this webinar and I hope it goes well. And I'm aware that I'm having a thought that I hope the webinar goes well. So I am both mindful that I'm having the thought that the webinar goes well, but there's an awareness of some kind of conscious observer of the thought of the thought. That's more or less what consciousness is. You know, who is there before the thought? Who is there after the thought? Story is something where our thoughts create a story or a dialogue about what something means about us or a situation that no longer is in the present moment. So if we're in story, we basically are out of the present moment. So I could be creating a story right now without any facts coming in that some of you are not liking the webinar, or this is the wrong time of day, or I don't know how I'll be perceived. That's story. I'm in a story, I'm in a loop in my head, and it's thought upon thought that is keeping a story alive. But that is actually not a pure thought, and it's not a pure emotion. That's a story, okay? So just wanted to make sure we had the same languaging about when I'm talking about mind, what we're talking about, because it's nuanced. Okay, and then we're going to be reviewing the body and the body from a trauma model. And there is the stress body and there is a trauma body. And we can have a stress response and we can have a trauma response, but that doesn't mean that we're in a trauma body. Okay. For a very brief example, we could be driving down the freeway. The car could kind of merge into our lane really abruptly. We could have a startled stress response, and then we go back into our lane, and then 30 seconds later, we feel fine again. That would be a classic stress response. Or your loved one comes home and they kind of start yelling at you and you don't understand why. You feel yourself elevate in your heart, and then you realize they just had a bad day, and then you start to calm down. Stress response. A trauma response is when our nervous system actually goes into a fight, flight, or freeze response. We're going to get into more detail with that, but a trauma response is when we are basically pushed out of our window of tolerance and we get into an extreme fight, we want to run away from something, or we completely shut down. Okay. A trauma body is when we are pretty much consistently in one of those three states, or always cycling through them pretty rapidly. And we can also cycle through them slowly, but we're always out of the window of tolerance. That would be a trauma body. Okay. So we're going to review the body tools and basically the distinction between calming tools versus alerting tools. And then bilateral stimulation, that's what BLS means. And then our eye positions and why they matter, our senses, and our breath cycle. Okay. And then we're going to review spirit and what spirit means. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this at the end of the webinar, but it really is about our belief system and meaning and purpose and humanity. Okay. So I am going to go ahead now and do a poll question for you guys. Okay. So we'll start with the first poll question. And this question basically says, how are you mostly feeling overall about the pandemic and shelter in place? Okay. And sometimes there's a lot of choices that you can choose from. On this one, it looks like there's 7 options. So I really just want to know your overall global feeling about being in this pandemic right now. Okay, so go ahead and take a minute and answer the question. Okay, thanks you guys. It looks like about a quarter of you are feeling okay. A quarter of you are feeling really scared and horrible, and half of you are feeling like you're just surviving, hanging in there day by day. So let me go ahead and share these results with you. Okay, so we have a question. Let me just briefly review the question. The question was, does that mean that some of us are living in trauma response all the time? Yes, that does mean that. If you have a trauma body, we'll talk about a little bit more at the end, it does mean that your nervous system, is pretty much always alerting to trauma. Okay, it's basically almost always out of the window of tolerance. Okay, which is what post-traumatic stress disorder is. Okay, so we're gonna move on now, and let's get a little bit more into the mind again. So the power of the mind, this is really important during the pandemic and the crisis. So the mind, again, as I already reviewed, is more than our thoughts and emotions. There's an ego observer to our mind. And I'd like you to take a moment right now, 5 seconds of silence, and I want you to observe the thought that comes into your mind and any emotion you may have. Okay. So for me, I was aware that I asked you guys a question. I had a thought wondering if it made sense. And then I had my ego observer mind know that I had that thought. And then I felt myself take a deeper breath, and I felt relief to take a deeper breath. Okay. So more or less, the consciousness is the one observing. We all get very wrapped up in our thoughts and our emotions. We really do. It's kind of the state of being a human being. We believe our thoughts so much and we believe our emotions so much, rather than seeing them as just transitional, transitory. They come and they go. They come and they go. Obviously, this is easier said than done, but it's important to point this out because during this time, you could have peaks of feeling like you're in complete crisis. You don't know how you're going to get through the pandemic. You're afraid you're going to end up in the hospital. You're afraid you're going to die. You're terribly afraid for your loved one. And then you look around you and you realize, oh, I'm actually feeling okay right now. That would be a beautiful moment to observe the power of your thoughts. And it was your thoughts that created the crisis. Okay. Now, that's not to say that there's not really a crisis going on around us. I mean, of course there is. We all have to just check the facts. We have to live day by day. And we are responsible, and only ourselves are responsible for our thoughts and our emotions. Okay. So one of the ways that helps me, and I think is helpful for a lot of people, is to start reviewing your expectations. This is also a condition of being a human being. We're not really taught as a young child not to have expectations. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Our parents expect things of us, our teachers expect things of us, the world and society expects things from us, but no one ever really teaches us about loss of expectations. And having kind of a firm but fluid hold of expectations, rather than the solid force that if the expectation doesn't come to fruition, then something's wrong with me. Okay. Everything about boundaries, it's important to have a firm but fluidness to it. And the same is true with expectations. So we can all have an expectation of seeking happiness, wanting health, wanting a long life, of wanting love. Those are all expectations that pretty much most human beings share together. Okay? We get in trouble when we start to believe that I have to have something by this point. I have to be married by the time I'm 30 years old. I have to have my career job by the time I'm 25. I have to have my first child by the time I'm 32. You know, and then it comes to 32 and you don't have your first child, and then you go through this depression. And woe is me starts to kick in without understanding that really your thoughts, your mind created an expectation that was not based on any present facts. Okay, so that's what we mean by the importance of fluidity. You may be a child and expect that, okay, I want to have a child by the time I'm 32. But when you're 30 and you're not anywhere near having a partnership, that would be a time that you start kind of looking at your expectation and realigning the expectation to the present moment. Like, okay, I'm 30, I don't have a life partner, so it's probably not reasonable I'm gonna have a child by the time I'm 32, unless I wanna go through eggs and IFS and things like this. So that's an example of how we have to shift our expectations. It doesn't mean the end goal is different, but we have to have some fluidity with it. So now applying that to our time of the crisis. This is huge right now. All of us, every single human being in this global planet we live on, expected to be able to leave our house, to go outside, to communicate with others, and to go to work, and to be with our loved ones without ever giving it another thought, right? So we are really being blown up right now about our expectations. All of us. No one is immune from this. And that's what's cool, is you guys are all in this together. We are in this together. We are all having to shift our expectations right now. So what's really important is lowering expectations does not equal hopelessness. Rather, it's the wisdom of impermanence. A lot of people say, oh, that's not good for me to give up on my expectation. I need to keep my goal. That's the right thing to do. That's actually not the right thing to do. The right thing to do is to have some goals for yourself, but have them be fluid and still have hope. You recognize how life is always impermanent. It's always changing. We don't know what's going to come in a year. So we're going to move on to what some of our cognitive distortions could be during this time and in general in life. So all of you have probably heard of cognitive distortions before. The classic ones are catastrophizing and denial. And during this time, we're seeing the extremes of this. And with the human mind, we often have kind of a bell curve of how people handle a given situation. And we're always going to have outliers. So there's always going to be people that catastrophize a situation. There's always going to be people that deny a situation. Most of us are kind of in the middle of the curve here, okay? So, and this is true for this pandemic time. You've seen it in news, you've seen it even in our government administrations. There are some people and friends of yours maybe that are really catastrophizing. They really believe that the world's coming to an end. The world's going to end in a year. We're all going to die. The human race is going to be gone. They're all going to die. Their family members are going to die. You know, they're really in a catastrophizing cycle. And then you definitely have seen on the news the deniers, you know, the people that believe this is a hoax, a certain political party made this up, or a certain country or a lab in a certain country made this up to destroy the human race. You know, everyone doesn't have to adhere to the shelter in place. They're trying to take away our money. So those would be the deniers, okay? Most of us fall in the middle zone if there's any distortion. And that's where a lot of personalization comes in. And this is the one we have to be really careful of during this time. And always. So personalization is when we apply individual meaning to something without any facts. Okay? That's the easiest, simple definition. So personalizing something is making a situation It's outside of yourself, about you. So for example, during this time, I can't believe this pandemic is happening to me. I can't believe I have to do this all over again. I can't believe that everything was going well and now someone's done this to me again and I have to start all over again. I can't believe that life is so unfair to me. Why is life so unfair to me? Those are all personalization comments. So it's not that you don't have a right to feel sad. And it's not that you don't have a right to feel devastated. But when you start to personalize it, then you're going into story. The reality is this pandemic is what it is. We could say it is unfair, but it doesn't mean it's specifically unfair for you. It's unfair for everyone. Okay, so that is a really good cue, is think about your pronouns there. When you're starting to think about your sadness or your devastation or your anxiety and your panic, are you using pronouns attached to it? Like, the pandemic is an anxious situation, or I am anxious because of this pandemic. Oh, I am an anxious person. So those are different comments. So just kind of monitor yourself there. Okay, so reframe and catching your story is basically what I just did. So what does the pandemic mean about me? Life? Is it really unfair? Or is it random? Is it just is? Or is there a larger meaning to it that's not just about you? And then a reminder again is, just as much as the mind can worry, it also has the power to be hopeful and creative. Okay, so we are going to get in now to the body and the nervous system. And before we do so, I'm actually going to ask you the poll question first. So the second poll question is asking, what kind of trauma response do you think you're having right now? And you can answer in 7 different ways. So go ahead and take a minute and answer that question. Excellent. Okay, thanks you guys. So it looks like it's pretty much all over the map. So some of you are in fight response, some in flight, some that you're not sure, and all of the above, and none. Great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share the poll results with you. Thank you for answering this. Okay, we're going to move on. I do have a question, so let me just review the question. Okay, so someone's using an example of their friend, how they are having a personal direct impact with the pandemic, and it's their reality, and it's affecting basically their home life, and it's affecting their financial situation, and they're experiencing trauma activation because of it. Is that personalization? It's probably both, so basically, not every traumatic situation has to lead to a traumatic body response, okay? Doesn't have to lead to a trauma mind. So I can get into this a little bit more when we come back to that, but you can have a direct impact, like I am. I have COVID, I have a direct impact, but I'm not in a trauma mind or body about it. So hopefully that helps answer the question. But we're gonna, if I don't answer it better by the end of the webinar, remind me and I'll come back to that question. So thank you. Okay, so the body and the nervous system. So fight, flight, or freeze, you all have heard of this. I just asked you which one is dominating for you guys right now. It's also really helpful to think about which one is dominating for your individual family members and for your community right now. And the question that was just asked, like, you know, from one participant, it seems like their friends around them doesn't think it's a big deal, or they're not taking it so seriously, but for this individual, it's really impacting them. So it's really important that we understand that everyone's going to react differently and there's no judgment. You know, some people go into kind of collapse, shutdown. Some people go into distraction and denying. And some people go into not wanting to deal with it. They don't want to turn on the news. They don't want to read anything about it. They'd rather not hear about it. And then some people are going to be really, really panicked and anxious. All of us are going to respond to how our bodies respond. That's all we can do, okay? But we have choice with taking appropriate action to help our bodies and to help our minds, okay? So the window of tolerance. So the window of tolerance is basically our body's ability to tolerate stress, to tolerate change, okay? So we all have a level, and most of us, let's say, are like right here. And we have, you know, stressor on the highway come in, and it might kick us out for a second. We go right back into the window of tolerance. We might have our loved one come and yell at us. It kicks us down, and then we come right back into our window of tolerance. And some of us have a really big window of tolerance, and some of us have a very narrow window of tolerance. And basically, the way to think about it is it's a functional level. So someone can have like a minimal functional level every day, and someone can have a high functional level every day. And this could be based on childhood trauma, and or it could be based on genetics. We could just be wired this way. So one person can only get one thing done a day, and they feel fine with that. Another person can get like 30 things done a day, and they feel fine with that. So it's important not to compare. But what is really important is that you know yourself, and you know when you are in your individual window of tolerance and when you are out of it, okay? So the window of tolerance is when we're not in hyperarousal, which is sympathetic activation, panic, heartbeat, rapidly breathing. That is hyperarousal. Hypoarousal is when we're kind of really low energy. Everything feels so tiring. It's hard to get anything done. We're not remembering things throughout the day. That's probably a hypoarousal. Okay. Now, some of us, and probably a lot of us, have a faux window of tolerance, which is a faux functional level. So we have a normal window of tolerance, and the faux window would be just above or just below, but not completely into collapse and not completely into overdrive. And those of us who have like a faux window of tolerance, we either know it well because we actually use it to our advantage, like emergency room doctors, for example, or mothers. Or some of us are very unconscious to it. And it's when we're unconscious to it that we have to be really careful. So we could be thinking that we're functioning fine, and then suddenly our loved one comes in, they're in a bummer mood, and then we just lose it. So that means we were already not in our window of tolerance. Our loved one having kind of a bummer mood that day really pushes us over threshold. Or we're driving down the freeway and someone comes into our lane, instead of just being like, we actually get really panicked and really upset and really angry and we go into road rage. That would mean that prior to that moment, you were not in your window of tolerance. You were just in the faux window of functioning. Now, some people operate in the faux window of tolerance a lot, and they're conscious to it and they're aware of it, and they kind of have to. So like, emergency room doctors. They have to be on, and they have to be on, and they have to be on. They cannot think about themselves and their own needs. They have a crisis come in. They were not able to get sleep, but they have to operate on someone. Okay, that would be a conscious faux window tolerance. But they know it, and they know that right after the surgery, they're going to go back into the room, their doctor's room, and they're going to crash. And they know it. And they have some operational internal intrinsic system awareness of it. That's much better than an unconscious faux window tolerance. Okay. So most of us probably right now, now we're in like week 6, I think, of the shutdown, we're probably starting to get into some faux window tolerance operation. So this is where you have to really look at your nervous system, your body, and how it's operating. So a sympathetic nervous system, in order for it to calm down and get into the window of tolerance again, it needs calming tools to help regulate it. And if you have kind of a parasympathetic collapse system right now, you're going to be needing more alerting tools to help regulate yourself. And then a globally activated system is going to need both. You're going to need both alerting and calming, or you're going to need some help with co-regulation with someone else to do that with, as a witness to regulate with. And even in shelter in place, you can still experience co-regulation through video, through phone, even through texting. Right now, even though I'm not seeing you, I can feel you guys. And hopefully you can feel me too. So there is a way to co-regulate with each other when we need it. The ultimate goal, obviously, is for us to have auto-regulation. But when we're really feeling down and we're really feeling over threshold, then sometimes we need to have a witness to help us relax again, to calm again. And sometimes we need a witness to alert us again. Okay? So we're going to move on, and we're going to start getting actually into the somatic tips. Okay? Just want to check in, and before we do so, I think I'm going to give you guys another poll question right now. Let's see. I'm going to ask you, before we do the body tips, I want to ask you how resilient you think you are right now. Okay, and there's 5 answers. And just kind of take a moment, take a full minute, check in with yourself during the pandemic time. How resilient do you think you're being right now? Here you go. Okay, thanks you guys. So let's see, some of you are feeling really resilient. That's amazing. And some of you are feeling somewhat resilient. Actually, it looks like most of you are feeling somewhat resilient. Okay, that's great. That's really good. I know I will survive, but I'm still struggling. Yeah, fair enough. Let me share the results with you guys. Okay. Great. So we're going to start getting into somatic tips to really help you during this time, things that you can do on your own. Again, each of these is just going to be a really brief overview because we only have an hour and a half this morning. So let's start by talking about healthy distraction versus mindless distraction. Believe it or not, distraction is considered a self-soothe tool. There is a very important distinction between healthy versus mindless distraction, though. Okay, so conscious awareness is everything. So if we are consciously aware, not just that we're going to do something, we're consciously aware during it, then that's a healthy distraction. Some people say, well, I knew I was going to eat all those cookies and then, have 5 cans of beer, so I knew it, so it was a healthy distraction. Well, did you know while you were having all the beers that you were still in the process of healthy distraction? And were you monitoring your body? Were you monitoring your thoughts during it all? Or did you do it to numb out or to freeze out or to not deal? Okay. So let me use an example, probably a better one with the TV or Netflix. So we have healthy distraction and we have mindless distraction. Okay. A healthy distraction would be, I watched an hour of news. It was a little upsetting finding out the pandemic is going to probably be extended. I think it's healthy for me to stop watching the news right now. And I'm going to choose to watch something that helps me feel better. I'm going to choose some comedy. Let me look through the comedy list. And I think I'm going to choose this episode because it will make me laugh. And then you watch the episode and you laugh. And afterwards you're like, it was good that I chose to watch that comedy episode. That's healthy distraction. Mindless distraction would be just looking mindlessly through everything on Netflix, hitting one episode after another, and after another, and then 5 hours goes by and you hardly even remember what you watched, but it distracted you. That would be mindless distraction. Let's see, I have a question, so give me a moment. Oh, okay. So the question is a good one. It's, what if we're feeling so awful that all we can do right now is just to use mindless distraction? Then do you. Do you. You know yourself better than anyone. If that's what you feel you can do, and that's all you can do, then do you. I do encourage you, though, to look at your trauma mind in that moment, because that statement is of a trauma mind. It's a very me personalized statement that your only way to be is this. So that's what hopefully the webinar will give you today, is to remind yourself of some of the tools you can have, that when you're feeling like all you can do is watch Netflix for 5 hours, maybe you can try to do some of these other things, at least before and after it. And then maybe tomorrow you'll only watch Netflix for 4.5 hours. And by the way, I'm using Netflix just as an example. It's not that watching Netflix is bad. I mean, I watch Netflix too. It's for us to have conscious awareness and presence through things, and to be mindful of what's happening in your body. And if you're in a trauma response, if you're in a trauma body, or if you're in a trauma mind, or some of us are in trauma spirit, which we will talk about at the end of the webinar. So, but this is not a time for any of us to judge each other. If you're feeling like you have to just do the 5-6 hours of Netflix a day, then do that. Okay? So, mobility. Mobility is any movement in any degree at any pace. Often people talk about how exercise brings, release, which it does. Even for me, thinking about exercise makes me feel better. But for some people, that doesn't work, right? It depends on where our nervous system is at. But what does work is mobility. So if you're feeling so collapsed and all you can do is watch TV for 5-6 hours straight, then no, it's not going to help you to go run a mile in the neighborhood with a mask on. There's no way. You can't even imagine getting out of bed. But you can still practice mobility. So mobilizing is, even if you're laying, watching TV, you can still do this. Right? And so what's important is having awareness of it. So I'm having awareness of moving my hands and my arms, right? I have awareness of this. See, that already caused me to take a deeper breath. So that, believe it or not, is mobility. Now, for some of us that have a higher window of tolerance system, we're going to need a lot more than that. We're going to need to do a mile around the block or in the neighborhood to really get our heartbeats going before we feel that, you know? So everyone is different. You have to find your own sweet spot in what is mobilizing for you. Okay? Eyes above the horizon. Huge. I cannot emphasize enough how this is probably the easiest shortcut, the fastest shortcut, and the most resolving shortcut. Most of us who are in despair, suffering, panic, trauma, depressed, collapsed state, our eyes are down. If you just really could take a video to yourself all day long, you will see that. Not always. No, there's some people that can have a gaze spot up and it's an activating spot for them. But for most people, neurobiologically, if they are looking down, they are not present. Now, I know a question might be, but what if the situation is really horrible and we don't want to look up? Then you're consciously aware of that. Okay? The nervous system is miraculous. If it needs to freeze, it will freeze. But if our mind is thinking it needs to freeze, that's not our nervous system, right? So right now we're in a pandemic. We're feeling overwhelmed by it. We're looking down, feeling overwhelmed by it. Me just automatically raising my eyes up. It's like, oh, I'm actually now back in the present. Even though the reality, the pandemic is still here, I'm actually aware of my environment now. So it forces the nervous system to kind of move up a notch, so to speak. So since you all are sheltering in place, you could practice with this for 24 hours, and you could put a little Band-Aid or a piece of masking tape right here on your nose and catch yourself throughout the day. See how many times you actually lower your eyes. I'm not talking about when you're reading or you're engaged in something looking down. That's different. I'm talking about when your gaze just goes down. You are not being mindfully aware. Okay? So good time to practice putting tape on your nose. Okay, so similarly, like I just mentioned, is catching yourself gazing and move the gaze spot. So there might be something that's catching your attention, your mind is going, and you start gazing at a certain spot, like I'm doing right now. And it's like, oh, okay. And then I'm just going to change my gaze somewhere else. Even that just helped my inside feel better. This is how we start to know our window of tolerance better and better. Catching our gaze spot. It doesn't change the situation or our thoughts, but it changed how we perceive the impact of our thoughts, because it forces us to be back in the present moment. Again, that's just pure neurobiology. Okay, BLS, bilateral stimulation. BLS can happen in a number of different ways. You all know from working with me that EMDR is based on bilateral stimulation, and Brainspotting is too, actually. And we all can have bilateral stimulation in our homes. We don't have to do it just in therapy. The reason you come to therapy for it is we learn to target, the negative cognitions you may be having, or the negative trapped energy in your body, or the overactivated energy in your body, or the stories that you're running or your core wounds. That's why you go to therapy. But on your own, you can be doing bilateral stimulation to help regulate yourself. Okay, so the most classic one is auditory. And you can download any binaural sounds on Spotify, iTunes, Pandora. You can even just Google bilateral sounds and see what comes up. They're all very affordable, you know, just a few dollars for each song. Highly recommend you have at least one of them on your iPhone if you have an iPhone, or on your computer if you have a computer. Obviously you all do since you're on this webinar. So hopefully after today's webinar, you can download at least one bilateral sound for yourself, okay? I encourage you to listen to one in the morning and one before bed, or anytime you're feeling any kind of over-arousal or activation. Okay, so visual bilateral stimulation is really just moving your eyes back and forth. Now I can do it just like this, or I can consciously first choose 2 points on my wall in front of me, and I can move my eyes to those 2 points on the walls. And the easiest is 2 corners of the room that you're in. It's amazing. Already deeper breath. It's really incredible. So that's visual. I really encourage you to do visual as much as you can. Olfactory is really cool. So any scent that you have that you like, it should be preferably something you like. So it can be even something in your refrigerator, in your kitchen cabinets. You have a seasoning you really like. I personally love menthol, so I use menthol. If you have any essential oils. But first of all, you can either take it in both nostrils, but to have it be bilateral, you're going to close one nostril and take it up the other. And then the other. And then you'd go back and forth. You could also just put some, if you have essential oils or menthol, you could just put some on anywhere in your head that you feel would be soothing for you. Some people do like it right under the nose, so they keep smelling it. Okay, so the final one is physical. So I'm going to demonstrate some tapping for you guys, but there's a variety of different things you can do for physical bilateral stimulation. The very first thing, believe it or not, is walking. Walking is bilateral stimulation. This is why walking is so healing for people. So just the walking movement, right? The organic nature of our body is to go left, right, left, right. Now, butterfly tapping is another one. It's where we cross our hands and we put one hand on the opposite shoulder and we tap. Okay. And then we have knee tapping. So I'm going to demonstrate here. And then I'm going to demonstrate thigh tapping. Okay, and another one, which is really good if you are finding yourself in the fight response and really over threshold with activation, is this, and especially if it's anger, then you can squeeze your fists left, right. Some people even do it with a punching motion, by the way, boxers, you know. It's funny how all of these things are interconnected. So, but really squeezing left, right, okay? That's another one you can do if you're really activated. And then if it's more like anxious activation, then the alternating feet is a very useful one too. Okay. So moving along, now we're moving into the self-security hold, okay? Now this is really good, especially for loneliness, especially if you're socially isolated right now by yourself, if you're sheltering in place and you're in an apartment and you're by yourself and you're without a cuddle mate or a friend that you can shelter in place with, you probably need to be giving yourself a lot of security holds, okay? So this is think of it as an assertive self-hug. So you're really you can do it one at a time or both of them at a time. You're going to push down really hard. That helped me. It felt great. Okay, so we're going to keep moving along. We're going to continue. We have about maybe 8 more self-soothe tips for you guys. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the spirit. And then hopefully we'll have some time for some questions. Okay. So this is a lot more of somatic experiencing work we're moving into. So Peter Levine is the one who created this model, which is the one hand on the stomach and one on the chest. Demonstrate. You're going to find that you doing this right now, your nervous system is talking to yourself, basically. You're attuning to yourself. Okay, so now this is the next trick. But before we go to the next trick, first let me also add in that a thing you can do both with the belly and your chest is you can then raise this belly hand to your forehead. And back to your belly. Okay, so this next one is a trick that is not just from somatic work. It's from anyone that's done any kind of personal health, personal training kind of work, trained as an athlete. We really do not breathe as deep as we should breathe. And most of us think that we take deep breaths, and we often are not aware of ourselves. I would say the average person is a chest breather. They are not a belly breather. So your goal right now, and I'm hoping that you guys are all doing this, whether you're laying down or sitting up, one hand on your chest, one on your belly. Your goal right now is to get your belly to go higher and wider than your chest. So you might have to push air into your belly at first to do it. So let me see if I can demonstrate for you guys. Here we go. So my belly is starting to expand out, and I'm starting to feel more breath and airways down here. Most of us breathe to here, even when we're deeper breathing, and then we come back up. So you breathing into your belly is also actually going to force organically your nervous system to re-regulate. And this is also what performance athletes do, especially those that get into a flow state. They really can do belly breaths in the moment of peak performance. Like Steph Curry running down the basketball field, three-pointer in the air, he probably just took a belly breath, not a chest breath, even though his heart's going like this. So I don't know this. I've never talked to Steph Curry. I don't know if that's what he would say, but I would imagine so. So as much as you can, really monitor your breath cycle and your belly breathing throughout the day, that's going to be a gym for you. Okay. So we're going to move along to orientation to space. Orientation to space is essentially the awareness that you have of yourself to the space around you. So for example, right now, I'm sitting in this chair. My elbows are on the chair. My legs are touching the cushion of the chair. My back is against the cushion. I have a wall about 4.5 feet to my right, about 6 feet in front of me, and about 9 feet to my left. Now I'm going to imagine the space from my body to the walls. Just that is orientation to space. It's having an awareness of your body and how it's moving in the space that you're in. There's also something called proprioception, but we won't get into that right now. So expanding and contrasting spatial awareness is a really good trick to use, but I want to pre-warn you that it's very individual, it's very personal. You have to know yourself and what is in your best interest before really doing too much of this. So if we haven't done it together in therapy, we can wait to do it in therapy together. The reason I'm saying that is for some people, for example, orientating out and out and out is so soothing. And for other people, it's extremely anxiety provoking. And similarly, for some people that orientate just to the chair, it feels claustrophobic. And for other people, it feels really relaxing. It's kind of like how there's two different anxieties in the world. There's the anxiety of those that live their whole life in a cave and they come out to the open spatial expansiveness and they feel overwhelmed. And then there's the folks that have lived always in open spatial expandedness and then they have to go and live in a cave and they feel overwhelmed. It's kind of the two different types of anxieties, and it's similar with our sense of spatial awareness. Some of us prefer to feel and sense closely in, and some of us prefer to expand and sense further out. So I would like you to take a moment, and I'm going to ring the bell, and I want you to take just 30 seconds, and I would like you to feel the walls of the room that you're in, and then feel the space, and then back to wherever you're laying or sitting down, and then back out to the walls, and then back out, back into where you're sitting or laying down. Okay, here we go, 30 seconds. Okay, hopefully you all had a good experience with that. I look forward to hearing from each of you individually about what that was like for you. We're going to move on to EFT, which is the Emotional Freedom Technique. And this is a technique that can be very useful, or people don't really find it useful, right? There doesn't seem to be a middle ground here. People either love it or don't find it useful. In my opinion, I think it is useful, but I think a lot of people get overwhelmed by feeling silly doing it, or it's not pragmatic to do it when you're out in the world, right? If you're with a loved one or if you're in a partner or you're at work, it's not like you can be doing EFT all day long. But it is something that you can be doing by yourself. And since you all are sheltering in place, You are going to learn it right now. We're going to do the basic EFT. We're not going to go into any of the details of EFT, but we're going to do a base setup of EFT. And you're going to repeat after me. Basically, I'm going to be tapping on certain points on my body, and I'm going to be saying things. And when I say these things, I would really like for you to say them back to me, please. You're basically going to repeat after me. So you're going to follow my hand movements, and you're going to follow my words. And you don't have to feel silly because you're by yourself. So it's great. Okay, so first we're going to start with what's called a karate chop point, which is this part of your hand. So you're going to go like this. Even though I feel completely overwhelmed by the pandemic, I totally and completely love and accept myself. You're going to tap on the top of your head now, either with both hands or with one. Even though sometimes I feel really panicked, I know I'll be okay. And I totally and completely love and accept myself. Up above your eyes, like this. Feeling overwhelmed, feeling scared, feeling worried. I love and accept myself. Okay, so again, you can do both hands or just one. Now this is under eyes. Even though I'm worried about my health and the health of my loved ones, I totally and completely love and accept myself. Under your nose. Even though I'm really worried about money, I don't know if I'm going to be able to financially make it through. I totally and completely love and accept myself. Under your chin or at your chin. Even though I'm really worried for my loved ones, I totally and completely love and accept myself. And then you're going to tap kind of under your armpit area. You can do both sides like this or just one. Even though the pandemic feels so overwhelming and we don't know when it's going to end, I totally and completely love and accept myself. You're going to tap kind of under your collarbone. Even though the pandemic is happening, it is what it is. And I love and accept myself. 2 really deep breaths in. Now look up to the upper left hand of your room, upper right hand. Count from 10 backwards. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And hum any song you want. Okay, you guys just did your first EFT set. That's great. Okay, so we are going to move on. Three more tools to use. The next one is called Flash. This was created by Philip Manfield here in the Bay Area. He is an EMDR clinician, and there's been a lot of efficacious research that's come out of using the flash technique. It's an extension of EMDR, and basically it's been proven that the rapidly blinking of your eyes will start to desensitize material and even unconscious material that was disturbing, and it will help it go down a more adaptive neural pathway, which is what desensitization is. So rapidly blinking your eyes at least 3 times throughout the day is going to help you. And you might need to look in front of a mirror to see if you're actually doing it. It kind of feels weird at first to do it, but I'm going to try to demonstrate more up close to you guys. So it's like this. So like that. So you can move your eyes really rapidly at least 3 times. So take a moment to try to do that. Okay, great. So grounding exercises, you all know most of these. You've done grounding exercises before. Let me just remind you that there is the 5 senses. Some people, the classic grounding exercise is just kind of imagine like while you're sitting or standing, that the extension beyond your feet is a tree and the roots of the tree. And the tree roots are going all the way down through the earth, through the middle of the earth. And some people imagine a black diamond or a diamond at the center of the earth. And then that energy or the sparkling lights of the diamond is coming back up through the earth, through the center of your feet, back up through every cell of your body. Every cell, this diamond light going through it, through every cell, back up through your head, to the very tip, crown of your head, all the way out to the sunlight of the stars. It's so expansive and it's now surrounding you. That radiant light is now surrounding all of you. So that's just a very brief classic grounding exercise with a visualization. A thing to do that really helps with grounding is to recognize your 5 senses. What are you seeing in this moment? What are you hearing? What are you smelling? What are you physically feeling? Okay. And a good one to use for like, what are you sensing? If you're feeling like you're not in your body so much, you can always get something really hot or really cold. Like some people go and put their face under water, put ice or chew on some ice, or have a heating pad. And the sharp contrast of temperature sometimes helps with getting us back into our body and like, oh, okay, this is what I'm feeling in my body right now. Okay, so visualization is similar to what we just did. There's many different ways to do it. What's important is it comes from you. What is your organic intelligence? What are you sensing is right to visualize for yourself? We all have different ways of perceiving the world and who supports us, whether it be in human form or beyond, okay? And it could be the earth, it could be nature, it could be an angel, it could be loved ones who have passed on. But a classic kind of Buddhist visualization is similar to what we just did with the white light, is breathing out compassion and breathing in pain. It's a Tonglen practice. And some people do this when they're feeling suffering inside, and they believe if they breathe out compassion, that is a way to help their own suffering. So, and if they breathe in pain from outside as a bodhisattva or someone that wants to help all humanity, that also is going to help others and oneself. So you can breathe out compassion, you can breathe in pain. And you can do that vice versa too. Like if you're really, really struggling and you need the world to breathe in your pain, then you can imagine that too. You can imagine that you're breathing out your suffering, you're breathing out your pain, and that you're breathing in compassion. And just do that throughout the day, even if it's just 20 seconds, you know? Breathe in, breathe out. Okay. So that is the end of our self-soothe tools. I'm going to now ask you guys another poll question. See how you are all doing. And this one is about which self-soothe tool will you most likely use on your own? And there are about 12 different answers you can. So remember to scroll down. There's about 12 different choices you guys have. Here you go. Go ahead and take a minute. Oh, you can't see the poll? Okay, let me try it again. Hold on. Okay, let's try again. There we go. Thank you. Okay, great, you guys. Thank you. You all answered. Okay, it looks like oh, wow, this is really great to see. You all are going to try, well, most of you are going to try at least a few of them, if not all of them. So this is really great. Let me go ahead and share the results with you. So just as a reminder again, what these are is the bilateral sounds, the BLS tapping, BLS eye movements, the conscious eye gaze on a resource spot, which by the way is that has been found by David Gran, who is the founder of Brainspotting. There's mobility, which is conscious movement, somatic self-touch, grounding through the 5 senses, blinking eyes rapidly, and emotional freedom technique. Okay, excellent. Really good, you guys. Okay. So we're going to move on. And we are now on spirit, purpose, and meaning. And then we'll try to end with just a couple questions for today, okay? So spirit, purpose, meaning for me, at least how I hold the context of life and for each of you, and how I hold the world. Spirit, purpose, and meaning is really about your belief system. It's not about whether you are religious or not. So this applies whether you're an atheist, you're agnostic, you have religious faith, or you have a spiritual system. But what is really important is that if you have suffering and it does not have meaning, suffering minus meaning equals despair. It's very important. Now, I know I just talked to you guys about personalization, but finding meaning is different than personalization. Okay? So suffering minus meaning equals despair. And that phrase was coined by Viktor Frankl, who has deeply informed my work as a clinician and human being in the world. And I believe his book, Man's Search for Meaning, should be on everyone's bookshelf. But basically, he wrote about being in the Holocaust and surviving the Holocaust. And that even people facing death or witnessing death by mass proportions, the most horrific thing possible, to watch your loved ones massacred, starved, massacred, tortured. There's still a choice. And when we have choice, we can create meaning, okay? So suffering minus meaning equals despair. So right now, the world is suffering. Right now, humanity is suffering. What's our larger meaning from this? So we don't go into despair. This is what I encourage you each to ask inside and within yourself. What is the meaning for you of this time for humanity? Okay. Now, for me, the meaning of this time is that we are being forced to recalibrate. To me, that's very clear. It's very obvious. Even though I personally am positive for COVID-19, I'm not personalizing that to mean anything about me. But I'm seeking a larger meaning for the world, that this is changing climate. This is changing how interconnected we all are and how we all now really know how interconnected we are. It's changing our beliefs and eating of animals, whether people like to believe it or not. It's changing the vibrational frequency of the earth at a physical level. It's changing the frequency of the human beings with each other. We all are forced to reprioritize right now. We all are looking at work and what is mindless work, what is mindless meetings, and what is necessary. We're all looking at what we really need to spend money on and what we don't. So there's incredible meaning coming out of this time. Incredible. That doesn't mean that we're not suffering. That's the important distinction. We're allowed to feel sadness. We're allowed to feel sorrow. We're allowed to feel anxious. But if we don't find a greater meaning, we're going to be despairing. So that brings us to the trauma mind. And what is the trauma mind? These are my terms, by the way. So the trauma mind is suffering minus meaning that is greater than the self equals despair and then self-despair. And that's story. So using the same example, I could be running a story about myself that I got COVID-19. And I could be telling myself a story that it means that I'm bad, that I did something wrong, I deserved it, I'm being punished, woe is me, 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 me. 5 me's. That's trauma mind. Okay? That's suffering without meaning to a greater than self concept. If I'm only finding meaning for myself and not greater than myself, I'm going to have trauma mind. Okay, trauma body is suffering minus the release that is titrated to completion from the energy at the time of the trauma. So we had something happen to us in our bodies and we couldn't release it either at the time or over time. So our bodies are still reacting as if they are in or going to experience a trauma. Trauma spirit is the suffering minus the attachment or spiritual repair, with a nurturing, unconditional relationship or relationship to a higher protector. We often see a traumatized spirit from severe childhood trauma, severe childhood neglect, or severe spiritual betrayal. Most of us have a sense of spirit and don't necessarily have a traumatized spirit, but a traumatized spirit is repairable. All of these are repairable. That's the beauty of inner growth work. So, and then the last thing is also kind of my 2 cents about the world and humanity. Take it or leave it. This is not based on evidence. This is just the way I function and navigate through the world. It helps me. Is that human beings are fundamentally good, yet they're fundamentally self-focused. Now, I know if Dalai Lama were in the room, he would probably chuckle and say, oh no, all human beings are fundamentally good. And I'm sure he's right. But the way for me, so that I don't run stories, is I like to think that human beings are fundamentally good, but they are fundamentally self-focused. We each seek happiness. We have with this an understanding that we can appreciate and appropriate expectations and recognize the fundamental goodness in everyone, as long as we know that everyone needs to take care of themselves first. And that way, during this pandemic time, when we hear about these people going to a Costco and buying all the toilet paper for their 2-person household so that no one else in the community has toilet paper left, it's like we can get really angry and upset about that, or we can think, oh, they're just being self-focused right now. Is it fair? No. Will they have a little bit of karma from it? Probably. But do I have to run a self-despairing story about it? No, absolutely not. Because my expectation was already that. People are good, but they are going to be focused on themselves right now. So remember that during this time. Your loved ones probably want to be there for you, but everyone is thinking of themselves right now. That's what happens when we're in a larger survival system. So finally, what does this pandemic mean to you then? What does it mean to you? Not about you. What does it mean to your loved ones in the world? Not what does it mean about your loved ones in the world? What does it mean to you? Okay, so we're going to move on to the last slide, and then I think we have a question here. And the question is, what if we feel like we made progress on our trauma, but due to the pandemic are now back in with the trauma bodies running the show, so it feels like I'm back to the very challenging place I've worked on. So that's trauma mind. Whoever just wrote that, you are in trauma mind right now. You're in trauma mind more than trauma body. So trauma mind is that you are believing that you're only your trauma body. Okay, so I encourage you to remove the me and ask yourself, what is the greater meaning of the pandemic for the world, for everyone, and down the road, what potentially could be the meaning for yourself, even if you're suffering right now, even if you have trauma body response right now. What potentially could this mean for yourself down the road? Even if you don't feel it right now, what could it mean down the road for you? Why do we experience suffering in the world? And I don't mean why do you experience suffering in the world? Why do we, all of us, as a human planet, why do we experience suffering? So try to remove the me from your question. Start with that, and then you'll probably recognize that you're in trauma mind more than trauma body. Now, with that being said, it doesn't mean that there's shame in having a trauma response. It doesn't mean that something's wrong with you because you're having a trauma response. Absolutely not. It just means that you need to be doing more of these self-tools throughout the day. And if you have to stop doing the self-tools and watching TV for 5 hours to numb out, then do that. But just try to start having more conscious awareness of it and catching yourself when you're in trauma mind. Okay? So finally, we have equanimity, gratitude, and resiliency. And I'm going to ask you guys another poll question. This is about gratitude. What are you most grateful for? And there is 8 questions to choose from. Great, you guys, thank you. So it looks like, nice. There's a lot of gratitude going on. That's great. Loved one's health, all of the above, or 2 or more. So let me share the results. Okay, so I'm gonna just talk really briefly about what these 3 mean to me. Okay, so equanimity is neither thought nor emotion. Equanimity is just the awareness of what is. So going back to the pandemic and how we might be feeling about it right now, or what our thoughts might be about it right now, it just is what it is. So we're just aware that we're in a pandemic and it's global. And we don't know where and when it's going to end. We do not know when the end is in sight. It is what it is. That's equanimity. Doesn't mean that we're not going to suffer. Doesn't mean that we're not going to feel sorrow and sadness and anxious and despair at times, but it is what it is. We're writing it out. We're writing it out. Gratitude. I'm grateful for each of you for sharing this journey with me. Each of you makes my life whole and complete, and I honor each of you for being on the ride with me and sharing your lives with me. It's my richest soulful work, and so I appreciate all of you for that. And then resiliency. Resiliency is just the inner knowing and the feeling that you have survived adversity before and will again. You know, in my own life, I never thought I'd get to the place where I can look back, having lived through SARS and the Asian economic collapse and the tsunami in 2004. I never thought 15, 16 years would go by and I would feel resilient from it. At the time, I was devastated. So it's natural to be devastated and have emotions, but we learn and we persevere. And now I'm extremely resilient because those things happened to me. So I have an inner knowing now that I have survived and I will survive again. And each of you have survived something before and will survive again. So with that being said, here's your final poll question. And it's about, I'm starting to notice I am accepting what is. Ah, that's great, you guys. That's really good. So yes, most of you yes, and somewhat. Okay, fantastic. I'm sharing the results. And we're going to take the last minute or so here. If anyone has any questions, please use the Q&A and you can type out a question, okay? Ah, thank you. Thank you so much, you guys. It's so wonderful to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining. It's been such an honor that you guys joined again. You know, what an honor for me. Okay, so we have one more question. Okay, so I am gonna hopefully right now, in a moment, hit stop record, and then hopefully we are gonna get this recorded and I will be able to share, okay? That is my goal for today. So I wish you all a wonderful weekend and we will be in touch individually. Okay, thank you so much. I'm so happy you guys joined. Thank you for the sweet comments. Okay, blessings to all of you. Remember to use your tools and big hug to you. Okay, take care.